Hey fellow duelists, it's RagingRaidRaptor here, coming at you with a brand new version of my Raidraptor deck profile, this time containing Strix. So without further ado, let's get started. Now although I am using OCG cards, I have mainly built this with the TCG current meta in mind. So starting off with, we have 3 copies of Vanishing Lanius. This is the card that will help you summon out the most amount of Raidraptor monsters from your hand, as its effect is not a hard once per turn, making it a staple in this deck at 3. Next up, we have 3 copies of Tribute Lanius, the Armageddon Knight of Raidraptors, since it can send any Raidraptor card to the graveyard, which will allow you to use the effect of Mimicry, Fuzzy, or even send Readiness to the graveyard if you are facing off against those pesky Trickstar players. And speaking of Mimicry, we are running Mimicry at 3, which is definitely a lot better now that we have Strix out in the game, since you can send it to the graveyard as link material, or you can special summon it to the graveyard, in addition to being able to be sent to the graveyard by the effect of Tribute Lanius. And also the fact that it can increase its level by 1, as well as another Raidraptor monster, will be very handy when I get to that particular card later on. Next up, we are running 3 copies of Fuzzy Lanius. I personally still prefer to run this card at 3, since it is an extra combo extender that is made better by the fact it can be summoned from the deck by Strix, meaning that it can search itself out, and then it can special summon itself from the hand, which is definitely very good if your effects get negated by a hand trap, for example. Next up, we are running 3 copies of Strix. Now I thought I had 3 real-life copies, but I can't seem to find the third one, which is why I'm editing a picture of it into the video. But the point is, I prefer to run 3 now due to the fact that you can easily summon Ultimate Falcon, and therefore want to try and summon it in the first turn, which is why I've decided to increase this card to 3 instead of 1. Next up, we are running 2 copies of Pain Lanius. Now this is due to the fact that I want to have more combo extenders in case I get negated by a hand trap, and also the fact that Pain Lanius. And next up, we now have 1 copy of Singing Lanius. This is due to help you extend your combos in the second turn, but also to help you achieve double force Strix. However, I did find that running it at more than 1 was still a bit bricky, so I feel like 1 copy is fine. Next up, we have a brand new addition to the deck in the form of Raidraptor Boost Strix. This card is essentially a hand trap that can prevent one of your Raidraptor monsters from being destroyed in battle, as when you discard it, when your opponent declares an attack with a monster, your opponent's monster will be destroyed, meaning that if your opponent tries to get rid of Ultimate Falcon, with the effect of Borosaur Dragon, you can just send this card to the graveyard, and it will destroy Borlo Dragon. However, since most people just play Borosaur Dragon at 1 copy, I feel like 1 Boost Strix is more than enough. And finally for the monsters, we are still running 2 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, the proxy versions of course. However, I feel like now that we've got Salamandrates and Thunder Dragons and Alter Guides in the meta, I have been testing Draw and Lockbird instead of this card. However, I still feel like in some instances this card is better than those cards. Next up, we now have 2 copies of Rank Up Magic Skip Force. The reason I'm running 2 copies of this is because of the fact that it's now extremely easy to summon Revolution Falcon and Ultimate Falcon, and also the ability to summon those monsters from the graveyard with the effects of these cards is definitely much more consistent and helpful than it was before. However, I did find that a 3rd copy was a bit too bricky and unnecessary, considering that these are easily accessible with Strix, so I think 2 copies is more than enough for me. Next up, we have a brand new addition to the deck in the form of the Phantom Knights Rank Up Magic Launch. This card will enable you to summon a certain rank 7 monster with the effect of last Strix, which I will get to in a minute, and the fact that it can attach itself to that rank 7 monster is extremely important to extending your combos to use its effect. However, I still found that running it at more than 2 was a bit too bricky and inconsistent, so I think running 2 copies is fine. And finally, we are running 1 copy of Rank Up Magic Soul Shaver Force. Yes, it is still very good at summoning out Revolution Falcon and Cyber Dragon Infinity, but I found myself needing to summon those cards less often than I used to, so I think that running it at 1 is still very good, although not as necessary as it used to be. Next up, we are running 2 copies of Raidraptor Nest. Now, I still stand by what I said in my Layer of Darkness profile, by saying that 2 copies is more than enough, considering that it is now much easier to search out with Mimicry due to Strix, and also the fact that the metagame has become so much faster than what it was previously, that you're probably not going to be able to survive long enough to see the 3rd copy. So I think running it at 2 is fine. Next up, we have a brand new addition to the deck, in the form of 2 German copies of Raidraptor Cool. Now this is to help you extend your combos even further, in case you get Ash Blossomed or Infinite Impermanenced. And also the fact that it's searchable by Mimicry, and the fact it can summon a Raidraptor monster from your deck, is a lot better due to the fact that Strix unfortunately negates the effect of a monster it summoned. And if you use it on your copy of Vanishing Lanius, you can use it to summon out last Strix, and then go into Ultimate Falcon, which is definitely an excellent effect, despite the fact that it prevents you from summoning any non-Raidraptor monsters. Next up, we are running 2 copies of Called by the Grave. Definitely excellent at playing through those hand traps, but due to the fact I am running more extenders, I feel like running it at 2 is more than enough on the opening turn. But also the fact it can negate any monster that your opponent has in the graveyard, and limits them from using that effect for the rest of the whole duel, is definitely a superb effect. Next up, we are running 3 copies of Twin Twisters. Now, although 3 might seem a bit unnecessary against most decks, this is mainly to counter Altergeist, as I found that to be the hardest deck to play around in this current meta format. And therefore I wanted to try and see it as much as possible, which is why I'm running it at 3. And finally, for the spells, we are running 1 copy of Foolish Burial, just so that we can have an extra option to send Mimicry or Fuzzy Lanius to the graveyard. And now finally for the actual trap cards, we are still running 2 copies of Infinite Impermanence to help you negate the effects of any starter cards that your opponent might have. And also the fact that it can prevent your opponent from using spell or trap cards in the same column as this card was activated in is definitely a surprisingly superb effect. And finally, we are still running 1 copy of Raidraptor Readiness, just so that we have an option to prevent our opponent from burning us to death with the Trickstar deck. And also the fact it can prevent your Raidraptor monsters from being destroyed in battle isn't too shabby. Next up, we are still running 3 copies of Raidraptor 4 Strix. Now, I have seen some debate online as to whether or not you should still run this at 3. However, I still prefer to run this at 3 if I feel like the best option is to go for double 4 Strix on the first turn, and then maybe go for another 4 Strix later on in the duel, which it can definitely be very important if you want to still use the effect of Strix, and don't have Revolution Falcon to use its effect for. Next up, we are still running 1 copy of Ice Beast Zerophane, which is still an excellent card, since it can negate the effect of every single face-up card on your opponent's side of the field, which is definitely superb against Thunder Dragons, as negating the effect of Thunder Dragon Colossus will immediately allow you to search with the effect of 4 Strix. And the fact it can negate your opponent's Floodgate cards and field spells is definitely still excellent. in conjunction with its attack boost. Next up, we are still running one copy of Tornado Dragon. This is for the same reason I'm running 3 copies of Twin Twister, to make it much easier to play against those pesky Altergeists, but also the fact it can prevent your opponent from using continuous spells that are mandatory for their decks to activate is still excellent. Next up, we have a brand new addition to the deck, in the form of Raidraptor Stranger Falcon. The reason I'm playing this is mainly to use it as a combo extender to get to a certain rank 7 monster, as there have been instances where I've opened up with Mimicry plus Vanishing or Fuzzy Lanius with a copy of Skip Force and thought that the best way to access this certain rank 7 monster would be doing it through this combo, and thus Stranger Falcon was necessary to play. Next up, we have a single copy of Revolution Falcon, which has been made a lot better due to the fact that it's easier to summon this card going first or second, and the fact that it can destroy any special summon monster with its effect by tacking into it is also exceptionally good, and made even better if you are able to detach a material to activate its other effect, of being able to attack into multiple special summon monsters at one go. Next up, we are still running the one German copy of Cyber Dragon Infinity. Although this card is still exceptionally good, of being able to take one of your opponent's monsters and negate an effect, I found myself needing it not as often as I used to. However, I still have it just in case I need it. Next up, we are running a OCG copy of Raidraptor Arsenal Falcon. Now, before you ask where I got this card from, I bought it on holiday while I was in Japan 2 years ago. But anyway, you run this because it's easily accessible within the deck if you have Last Strix and the Phantom Knight rank up card, as it can special summon a Raidraptor monster from the deck and then immediately go into Y Strix, and it will trigger its effect to special summon any Raidraptor Xyz monster from the extra deck, which will most likely be Ultimate Falcon, making this card even better during Link format than I made out in my original discussion video. Next up, we are running a single copy of Satellite Falcon. Again, this is mainly used as a combo extender to summon Ultimate Falcon with the effect of Last Strix with rank up magic Skip Force. And for the last Xyz monster, we are running one copy of Ultimate Falcon, which has definitely been made a lot better in this current format, since most Link monsters and most effects cannot get over it. And the fact that it can burn your opponent from and also the fact it can burn your opponent from 1000 damage each turn during the end phase, and the fact it can stop your opponent from activating any effects for the whole turn, makes this card exceptionally good. And now for the Link monster you've been waiting for. We are running 3 copies of Raidraptor Y-Strix. I feel like 3 is a very good number, since it's the easiest Link monster for this deck to access. The fact that it can set rank up cards and special summon monsters from your deck is exceptionally good, and mainly I just use it in case I need to summon more than one Xyz monster in a turn, making this an exceptionally good card. And finally, for the last Link monster, we are running one copy of Borosaur Dragon. You all know what this does, we all know of its OTK potential, and also the fact it's very easy to summon if your copy of Y-Strix is still on the field on your next turn, makes this card extremely easy to summon. Well, I hope you enjoyed my deck profile of Pure Raidraptors. If you have any suggestions for tech choices, let me know in the comment section below. I've been RagingRaidRaptor, and I'll see you all again next time.